Okay, we are live with another Catalyst Talks this afternoon. My name is Joseph Kopser. I'm joined with Liz O'Brien, CEO and founder of the Freedom Learning Group. Liz, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm good. And I'm just CEO, not quite innovative enough to be a founder yet.
Well, thank you for making that distinction. But regardless, you are in charge now and you are making it happen. So what we're going to do for the next 20, 30 minutes is not only have a discussion between the two of us, but because we're live across YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, hopefully draw the audience in on what is a really critical issue. Let's jump into the most important question of the day, and then we'll circle back to your story and what you're doing. But why are so many women feeling like they need to drop out of the workforce during the era of COVID? I know it's evident to some, but maybe not all of our viewers.
Right. And I think you and I could probably talk about this for hours and how we got to this situation. And really, COVID is just exposing so many of those weaknesses that exist in the system across America. And we can go all the way back to pay differential. And if you're looking at traditional nuclear families where the female is primarily earning less than the male in a relationship, when we're faced with having to make decisions, if we have children in the house, who's going to school them in virtual environments, who's going to be their primary caretaker. Ultimately, families have to make decisions that are financially based. And so we are, for that reason, seeing women leave the workforce in droves. But when we look back 10, 15 years from now, the impacts that we're going to find on women are going to be astounding. We are setting women back decades now as they are leaving the workforce and then going to have to at some point fight their way back into it.
You know, for our viewers, I've talked before about Emily Ranshaw and the new service she's providing through investigative journalism focused on the impact of so many aspects of women in life. It's called the 19th. As a shout out to the 19th Amendment, the women's suffrage movement. So when you're talking about what that means in terms of women dropping out, give us some size and scope of just how big of an impact we're talking about.
Yep. Well, think about this. In September, 865,000 women left the workforce. It was about a 4-to-1 ratio comparatively to our male counterparts. And so when you think about layering in safe, affordable, accessible childcare, and it's not there anymore, we have no option but to stay home and provide opportunity for children that are under our roof. And so, we're now having to. Companies have done a tremendous job, right, during COVID and being responsive and putting people in remote positions. But sometimes pandemics are the impetus that we truly need for change. And so I'd love to see organizations couple remote work with flexible work.
Yeah. My last guest last week, Christy Cardenas, actually talked about that very thing. It was called the Silver Linings Playbook. And what she laid out was, what are all the things we could do differently going forward? But you also brought up a great point about making the decisions about when to return to work and concerns for preschool. It cracks me up. Anybody that pushes back and says, why all this talk about diversity and why all this talk about more decision makers at the table? And frankly, if it's a bunch of old dudes at the table who haven't had to think about these decisions, it's not in their frame of reference when they're making these decisions. So speak to that a little bit, just about the importance of women empowerment, and then we'll kind of get into what you're doing with the Freedom Learning Group.
Absolutely. And listen, any conversation that I go into where I have to make decisions for the good of our organization, I want diverse thought leaders at the table with me. And I want folks that are going to provide a very different look and be able to have meaningful exchanges of thought process and ideas. And we can't do that if I'm sitting down and across the table from me, looking back at me as somebody that's exactly like me with the same path in life, same experiences. And it just doesn't help us serve America at large.
Yeah. In fact, General Patton famously said that if everyone's thinking the same way, then somebody isn't thinking. So well said. So let's talk about what you're doing with the Freedom Learning Group for those that may not know what they're up to. And by the way, if you personally or your company is impacted by, and this is for the viewers, the discussions that we're talking about with Liz today, drop it in the chat. We're going to be going to Q&A here before the top of the hour. And I'd love to get your input or your perspective as well. So Liz, tell us more about the Freedom Learning Group.
Sure. Well, Freedom Learning Group was founded by a Marine Corps family while they were living in Germany. Our founders, Nathan and Stacy. Stacy had just left a great job. They were a reserve family, so they'd never experienced basically what you and I know to have been challenges for active duty spouses for years.
Yep.
And so Stacy was at a meeting and looked to her left, and there was a chemist, and looked to her right, and there was a biologist, and she had done great work for learning companies before, and said, well, I can create a solution for this, and put military spouses to work and create and be a quality vendor for publishers, for universities, for corporate America across the board. And that's really how Freedom Learning Group was born.
And so before we get a little deeper, because I want to go back to this idea of what content that is that they're creating, I've heard it said, and please correct me if I've got it wrong a little bit, but that military spouses, when you look at them as a demographic, as a part of society, they are the most qualified, underemployed part of our society. Speak to that point, what's being done, and then if you want to circle back and talk about what you're doing with the content creation, please do.
Absolutely. So by and large, on any given day, military spouses are 4 to 6 times unemployed and underemployed than their civilian counterparts. And in parallel to that, they are more educated than their civilian counterparts. But it is a terrible cycle because we're 10 times more likely to move across state lines than our civilian counterparts. So that comes with a host of challenges around certification, around licensure, around finding a new job when you get to town.
And that's whether you're a teacher, a lawyer, even a hairstylist. There's a lot of different certifications across state lines, correct?
Absolutely. I don't forget how to be a florist when I drive from New York at Fort Drum to Fort Polk, Louisiana. But regardless, when you get there, you still have to go through a recertification process. And so now that sets your timeline back even further. So there is a great movement across the country around reciprocity and making inroads around occupational licensing.
And for our
challenge.
Yeah. And for our viewers, if you've ever experienced that, if there are states that are doing it well, please give them a shout out in the comment section, because I'd love to know, because I'd love to highlight those efforts. So going back to the Freedom Learning Group, as I always say, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, kind of describe the process. What's the user experience? What's the user interface for the folks that you're talking about? Are they able to work wherever they are? Do they pick their flexible hours? What it is that they're actually creating? Give us that idea of how it works.
Yeah. Absolutely. And credit Nathan and Stacy, our co-founders, for really building an innovative and solid business model. And they were taking their cues from military spouses as they built this. So we are a company that was built on the backbone of technology to serve remote and flexible workers. Because they recognize that what a talent of pipeline military spouses were. So there are pieces layered into that to make sure that we are providing a quality product. We take military spouses, we reskill them and upskill them, put them through last mile training, and instead of turning them out to other companies, we're keeping them for Freedom Learning Group so that we can better serve our clients. And so you'll see us taking on projects around content creation, curriculum creation, pretty much anything publishers, universities, or corporate America need to produce for their product. And we've run the gamut on what we produce.
And so, and by the way, you got a nice shout out there from Jennifer Jersey on Facebook. I guess she's watching us. So talk about what you mean by the content creation. So if I am a company and I am wanting to do a new manual, a new technique, a new website, am I going through that publisher, or am I ever interfacing with you? So are you B2B, B2C? How does that work?
Yep, we're a little bit of a mix of everything in theory. So we have publishers that come to us and we are writing their chapters for chemistry textbooks or for physics textbooks. I am not writing those chapters, just to be clear. We're hiring the subject matter experts.
I was told there would be no math today, so that's just
right. That's right.
So just let's step back then for a second. And now that I understand the business and how it's working, if you're looking at how to expand or scale this, so your focus initially, because this Marine Corps couple that started it, was on military spouses. Is there anything to limit this just to that community, or do you see this as an opportunity for expanding and scaling larger?
Yeah, and we are expanding and scaling larger. You're going to see a tremendous ramp up in 2021. We've been putting pieces together behind the scenes to manage that scaling. 77% of our workforce is currently military spouses and veterans, and then we have a percentage that are civilians sprinkled in there, and that part is unbelievably important because we need to bridge that civilian military divide that exists. So we like having that balance. But I don't feel like we're limited because we embrace the model around the definition of a military spouse is really anyone who's had a spouse that's had their career impacted by a service member's commitment to this country. Because what we found years ago is Gold Star family members were being left out, divorced military spouses, right? You move 17 times in 20 years and all of a sudden you're divorced and you have no career under you and you have to find a way to a path to economic opportunity. So we really embrace that model, which in theory expands our access to more than 1 million military spouses that are out there. But that being said, this is a model that can be scaled for other underserved populations, right? We're building a model for this population, but there is no reason it can't be replicated for other underserved populations.
Well, so that's the key that I want to focus in on. So you're taking a technology tool and a platform to bring together underserved populations or underemployed, talented populations. One of the highlights of Catalyst Talks, I've talked to a number of CEOs, in fact, number of women. Liza Rodewald with Instant Teams is doing some amazing work for building up capacity in a growing company. Just recently talked to, haven't had her on Catalyst Talks, a woman named Catherine Wolf with a company called Odetta that is looking at taking easily repeatable tasks that just cannot yet be mastered by AI and automation and taking very educated women, mostly women, empowering them to be able to bring these companies together to help bridge that data consumption. So lots of different ways it's happening. So when you look to the future of work, when you look at where we're going post-COVID, what are some of the silver linings or continued challenges that we're going to need to overcome?
Yep. So I think what we have to overcome immediately is attempting to put a timeline on what the future looks like.
Good point.
There's nothing hard and fast in the sand that says by May we're returning to work in a normal environment. So silver linings, I think, for years we've been knocking on corporations' doors. Please work to make jobs remote. Please work to make them portable. Please work to make them flexible. And there was a lot of pushback around it. People don't like to be uncomfortable. They don't like to expand past their current culture. And so for us, if we're going to find a silver lining in this year, it's that 2020 has forced the hand of companies across America. And I love that Freedom Learning Group was already positioned as a thought leader in this space. So as we were watching companies scramble and close their doors and move to remote, we were already at scale and at capacity. So we didn't miss a beat. And that allowed us, I would say in September, we increased our statements of work and folks working for us in that Q2 to Q3 by 47%. And so that's the power, I think, of a truly remote workforce.
Yeah. And again, to our viewers, don't let me hog all the questions. But if you don't ask any questions, by all means, I'm going to keep plowing into it. So Liz, let me kind of take it to the next idea, which is, so we've got the situation where we're putting a timeline on it. And if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is it shouldn't just be we're going to make changes until a certain day. You're talking about reinventing the future of work. And so in an ideal world, what do you think that looks? And you can take it either by age or stage in life. Just who do you want to see most benefit from real and lasting changes?
Yeah, I want to see the American population at large that needs to go to work benefit from these changes. And I know that you have been an entrepreneur for years, but when I think about what that cycle looks like, going back to this summer when Salesforce partnered with Hiring Our Heroes and funded a fellowship for them that would put Salesforce fellows, match them with companies. Well, then as a small business, we knew we needed to scale. We reached out, took those Salesforce fellows into our house, and it advanced our timeline for scalability by 6 months. So when you think about that holistic approach of big business to nonprofit to impact small business, this is a fantastic cycle where we're seeing collaboration for solutions across America. And ultimately, all of that effort then impacts how many spouses we're putting to work next year.
Yeah. So we got our first question that came in from a good friend that I believe you and I both know, Noreen O'Neill, who's asking, what do you define or how do you define this work-life balance in this new normal?
Is there such a thing? I mean, I think
Or as some people say, we're not working from home. We're now sleeping in our offices.
that's right. So I think it starts with, for us, we had to go back. We were already remote, but we had to, in July, we realized our folks were pretty stressed out because they now had kids at home, a dog, a spouse, right? And so that
And
entire
it's nonstop.
environment had changed. And so we reached into our folks that were managing people and told them, you have the power to set the time and deadlines for what's good for your folks. And so there are nights that in my role, I'm taking calls at 11:30 at night because I know that that is when whoever is reporting to me or needs to get something to me, I know that's the best time for them. And if we truly want to be a global workforce, then we have to adapt and change. So I'd say balance for me, and I can't answer for everyone, Noreen, is making sure that I'm meeting the basic needs of everybody on a daily basis because, I still have 3 kids that have been home for 280 straight days. You can probably
But who's
hear them
counting?
running by. I am every day. I mark another one, mark another day off.
Okay. So for me, the way I would kind of approach that, and be curious to get your take on it, which is I realize, in fact, I just literally posted on this about this on LinkedIn yesterday, is that as much as I thought it was a benefit to now not have to worry about my commute, to be able to not have to worry about travel, it meant that actually I was doing more and having so much more to do. And I was lucky. We were empty nesters, Amy and I, and yet I felt like I was getting caught up with so much to do that I had to just stop, push back, and go slow and low, as the Beastie Boys might say, slow and low. That is the tempo. Because I felt I was burning myself out. So I don't know how your experiences were with that as an individual, as a leader, as a CEO of a company. But I'd be curious to see, going forward, how much of people retain that. What do you think about going forward?
Yeah, and so we layered pieces into our organization where, I brought a personal trainer on who disseminates videos each week for the adults and for the children that are at home. We're launching a business resource group so that we can, as an organization, they're driving the solutions forward where they see challenges or need for support. And for me, I'm not sure that there will ever be such a thing as work-life balance, but it's learning to prioritize what is of the most importance today, certainly.
Yeah. So let me change to a slightly related topic, which is just this idea of, so you're growing the workforce, you're adding more people, not just to your team, but you're helping other companies grow and build. So talent management is important. I saw on LinkedIn, you all just recently hired a new member of the team. How do you recommend in this new normal for companies to think about talent management and what they're looking at? Because now, because of so much more remote work, we have a whole new cohort of people that we can bring on to teams. How do you hire in this kind of environment?
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? And so I think for each organization, you have to decide what is a priority for you. For us, as we've been adding people in at the leadership level, we really needed folks that could lead in a truly remote environment. And so part of our interview process was, here's your team. How do you manage them? How do you keep them engaged? What are your most difficult challenges? Because most of these folks were coming from other jobs, as you move to remote work, and we were really pulling on the thread. But for us, EQ is one of the most important things that you can bring to a remote
The
organization.
emotional quotient of being able to read a room and know other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you're saying it's not just all Zoom happy hours?
There's a lot of Zoom. And hopefully every once in a while there's a happy hour, but even that's a balance. I mean, how often do we want to look at ourselves on camera every day? And so making sure that we are intentional about that. I know an org that's implemented a no meeting policy on Tuesdays, right? So,
Like that.
yeah, I like it too. It gives folks a moment for a breath and to really dig into their work. I think what we saw as organizations move to a remote capacity is that all of their workers suddenly felt the need to schedule Zoom calls to prove that they were going to work. And so we had to scale back on what we were saying yes to.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point. Let's talk about meeting management in this because, the viewers that are watching this are everything from entrepreneurs that are trying to start or build their own new companies, or maybe they're in an existing company and they're thinking of leaving. as you're giving guidance to not only your team, but maybe to others, proteges, and people that you're mentoring about how they think about how they conduct themselves, or maybe think about making a transition, what is the best advice that you've seen given recently, and what are you thinking?
If you're thinking about leaving an organization, first figure out why. Why is it that you want to leave? And then where is it that you want to go to, right? What purpose are you being drawn to? And for folks that know me, they know for decades that I was coaching college basketball, and I always thought that was my passion in life. And when I moved into workforce development, in large part thanks to Noreen, I realized that I can find tremendous purpose in what I'm doing every day by going to serve the military community. And I can still get my passion by coaching my kids in AAU basketball. So identifying why you want to leave an organization, and then when you're going to another organization and through interviews, what is the piece that's drawing you to it, and digging in on that if you have the luxury to do so.
Yeah. I tell folks all the time, I call it the alarm clock test or the Saturday morning test, whatever they can relate to better. But basically, with respect to the alarm clock, when it goes off, if you pop out of bed, or even better, if you're getting up before your alarm clock, you're doing okay.
Yeah.
If that alarm clock is the only way you're getting out of bed, you might want to examine a little bit what you're doing. And worse, if you're hitting that alarm snooze like 5-6 times, that's a real moment for reflection. And then the Saturday morning test is, what do you do on a Saturday morning when you have nothing else going on and nobody to tell you what to do? Whatever it is that you like getting into, man, if you could take that passion and line it with a purpose, and then ultimately one day get a paycheck from that's obviously cooking with Crisco. But I want to go back to your point, though, about the company. I recently read in a book, The Talent War, by Michael Sorelli and George Randall, this idea that people don't leave companies, they leave bosses. And toxic leadership is something that companies all too often don't think about. I see entrepreneurs at all levels, companies at all levels, they'll invest a lot of time and resources in finding talent. But then once they have that talent, they don't recognize that they have a toxic leader somewhere in their organization that is causing their talent to run for the doors. Have you seen that in your career? How do you think that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have certainly seen that. And I think we've all probably been in the situation where we've learned what we don't want in any company or organization that we might someday have the privilege to lead. We're challenged. We have hundreds of people going to work every day with us that are all over the globe. And so, I want to say a year and a half ago, I was at Dreamforce, hosted by Salesforce, and I heard General McChrystal speak. And he articulated his approach, which was the closest I'd ever been able to match to coaching college basketball, right? Where you go out and you have to recruit really good talent, and then you coach them up, but then you have to trust them when you put them on the floor that the point guard's going to get the ball to the wing, and the wing's going to put it into the post. And if the post doesn't have a good shot, they're going to kick it out, because they have this immense amount of trust and buy-in to the mission at large. And so when I heard General McChrystal speak last year, it was the first time I really heard a leader so tremendously articulate empowering small groups. And so that's what we're working to do every day at Freedom Learning Group. We have our project managers, we have our senior project directors. They know the intent of the projects, but we don't just throw it at them. It's on us to make sure that they are upskilled, that they understand our model, and that we're putting them in a situation to succeed. But it's really trusting the people that are going to work for you. And that goes to making sure people aren't leaving us because of toxic leadership.
Yeah. Well, in fact, that's what I love about these Catalyst talks. You never know where they're going to take them. So I want to go back to this idea of your experience in sports. There's so many analogies about team building that comes from the military, team building that comes from sports. I'm a huge college basketball fan, having grown up in Lexington, Kentucky. Kentucky Wildcats are my team, even though this year it is an abomination.
Everything is.
Well, everything is. That's true. Thanks, COVID. What are those takeaways for people, especially young people thinking of getting into sports, or maybe not getting into sports? They might be a little leery about team sports in an era of COVID. What's your advice to them, and what are the leadership lessons learned from sports?
Yeah, the one piece I take on a daily basis that I think it's probably two pieces that sports has given to me, is the willingness and the ability to be uncomfortable on a daily basis. Should a recovering college basketball coach be leading a learning company? In theory, no, but it was a willingness to step outside and educate myself on a daily basis, and be able to grow those teams to go to work and do something effective. So when I think about it, all my girls play sports, and they play non-traditional sports for girls, right? They're in ice hockey, they're in wrestling. And it's not that I have dreams of them going out and getting a scholarship and going to college for free, because it's not realistic. But what I have and what I watch is, they're up every day at 7 o'clock going outside to train. So they're already uncomfortable, and they're going to train tonight, probably when it's freezing and in the snow, and they're learning how to work as a team and how to build that trust. And those are all the pieces that when you go out into life, whether you have a career, whether you raise a family, whether you're on an island somewhere, they're all the pieces that really come together to make you a solid contributing member to society.
Yeah. And I think it's that teamwork aspect and the shared adversity. It is this notion that, it sucks. It sucks for everybody. So misery loves company. Let's get through this together. At West Point, we always used to say, cooperate and graduate. This idea of getting through it. So we only have a couple of questions. So if there's any viewers that want to ask a question specifically for Liz, either from the Freedom Learning Group or looking specifically at what she's been doing to empower more women in the workforce, especially from a remote and flexible standpoint, or even college basketball, please jump in because we only have a couple of minutes. So let's talk about it a little more in depth there about this notion of non-traditional sports. I thought the phrase you used, non-traditional sports for women, and I would say for now, we saw just the other night the young woman at Vanderbilt becoming the first woman in Power 5 conference to score a point with the extra point that she made. What is the future? What is the impact of Title IX? I think we've gone past the days of backlash, but where are we right now in terms of making more opportunities for women as they're going through competitive sports and beyond?
Yeah, and kudos to Sarah Fuller for getting out there and really, I love the part though where her teammates were embracing her and celebrating with her, and that's the power, right? Like we don't need anything to be just primarily women, right? We need to go through this hand in hand where I'm advocating for you, you're advocating for me, and we're making inroads. There's so much to talk about Title IX. The initial intent around it certainly has made tremendous strides. I know as a beneficiary of all of that hard work. And then where we are today and where we're going. I mean, listen, my girls wrestle because their father wrestled at West Point, and he said, I'm going to be a part of the all girls club, and I'm going to make sure that you have an opportunity to be on that mat and learn the right way. And so that's the power of what fathers can bring to this as well, saying, hey, you want to be a kicker for Vanderbilt? And that's great. I'm going to take you to the field and be part of that. And so it's us together opening those doors. But we're watching, the evolution of women as athletes. From the time I graduated and went into coaching 4 years later, female athletes were completely different. They were stronger, they were faster, they were more skilled. So, I think doors are just. And,
we're celebrating here within the last few years of women specifically getting into the infantry. In fact, specifically, the fact that MJ Hagar, a Texan, a good friend of mine, who was a part of that lawsuit against the Secretary of Defense several years ago that opened up every last job in the DOD to women equally. And now we have, women in the infantry, in the Army. We had a few women recently that graduated from Ranger School, which is no joke at all. I love the march in the direction that it's going. So we only have literally 2 minutes. This 30 minutes went fast. What did I leave out? What do you want to share with our viewers before we sign off?
Yeah, come visit us at freedomlearninggroup.com. We are hiring every day. We're winning new projects every day. We have a great careers page. Jump on there and see what speaks to you. We have Microsoft Azure, marketing, microbiology, finance, IT. I mean, you name it, we're winning projects on a daily basis. So apply today. And even if we don't hire you today, doesn't mean we're not going to circle back and reach out in a month.
Well, that is very helpful. In fact, as we wind down, if there are either companies that you, Liz, would like us to highlight when I do the summary of this and post it on LinkedIn, or if you're a viewer and there's something that you are interested in terms of wanting to know more, drop it in there. And we can also leave the website on the link one more time. So Liz, as we sign off, I want to thank you for your continued service, especially in expanding opportunities for women in the economy, but more importantly, for all persons persons that, as you rightly pointed out, are underserved or underemployed in the economy. Because if we get everybody working, I'm convinced they'll remember we have more in common than that what separates us. And then ultimately, a lot of the issues that some people are so worried about today will kind of fade away into the sidelines because they're really not the most important issues. Liz, thank you very much for being on Catalyst Talks today.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.